Okay, so we're going to pick a team of the tournament. This, let me just say straight out, this is just a bit of fun. You will probably disagree with a lot of my picks, and that's fine. Nobody's going to die if you disagree with me. So all I ask is any disagreements, whether it's with me or with, like, if you're chatting with somebody in the comments or anything, just be civil. It's pretty simple, right? So this is my opinion in terms of these picks, and no player has, offered me any bribes to be in the team, so don't worry about anything like that. But yeah, basically these are the players that I thought, had the most impact on the tournament. I did recognize, I'm Irish, so therefore there's going to be bias towards Irish players. So I tried to avoid that for the most part. There were, I would say, like, very competitive in a lot of positions, but there were 3 positions that I felt were, very difficult to pick. And with those, it means that players that I feel like are probably in the best 15 players in the tournament aren't necessarily in my team, because I gave myself a strict rule, because I picked a team once and I picked a few players out of position, and then I told myself, you got to repick that, because you need to stick to picking players in position, and it might mean that a player that you think that absolutely deserves to be in the team in the tournament doesn't make it in there, but that's just how it is. You've got to pick, based on if it was, a 15 on the positions that they played, and even, not positions that they could play, because some players you could genuinely move, especially if we're talking about, like, second row into back row, that kind of thing. You could definitely move players down there. But what I based that on was, if somebody was going to move, they had to have played at least a couple of games, in a certain position. So if they appeared in 2 different positions, then for me, their performance over the entire tournament meant that they could be picked in one of those 2 positions. I think that was fair. Anyway, I'm going to get on with it. Again, you're not going to agree with every one of my picks. You're probably not going to agree with, some of you aren't going to agree with any of my picks, but that's fine. Again, it's just a bit of fun, and I'd love to see what you guys think in terms of what your pick. Also, just before we finish as well, I'm only picking a 1 to 15. I'm not doing a bench, because, it took me long enough to collate everything for this, and picking, I'm imagining this video already is going to be like almost an hour long, or somewhere around an hour long. So adding on another 8 positions, or another 8 picks, would just make it, even for me, too long. So we're going to start out. We're going to obviously pick from 1 to 15. So loose head, let's go through, those that kind of stood out to me in the tournament. So first of all, for Ireland, we had Andrew Porter. I felt that he was much better than he was last year. Still had some struggles in the scrum, but I don't think he could pick a prop in this tournament that didn't have at some point some struggles in the scrum. It was so competitive in that area. I think he had decent impact around the loose as well. It was way better than he was last year. For me, he looked a bit out of form and a little bit unfit as well last year, but this year a big step up from him. Then Ellis Genge for England, and Joe Marler as well. They kind of shared the propping duties on the loosehead side for England. Genge was certainly was decent. He certainly did have struggles in the scrum, as did Marler, but they both played some decent games as well. I'd say of the 2, Genge was certainly the standout for me in terms of performance, and he put in some big performances for his team as well. Next time we have Pierre Schoeman. He's always been a decent prop, but this year I think he's making more meters in contact. He would, his set piece was going better than we've seen before, and he had that kind of try threat as well about him. Also, getting in there, just doing lots of donkey work and working the breakdown as well. Then we have Cyril Bai. like a lot of the French players are going to talk about, got better as France got better through the tournament, which is it's kind of obvious when you say it that way, right? That the players start playing better when the teams start playing better, but it's not always the case, right? That you have players who can perform well in poor teams or in teams that aren't doing so well. But I think Boy wasn't great against Ireland, but towards the end of the tournament, you could see him having, the impact that you expect from him. Then Fischetti for Italy. Last year, for me, he was the best loose head in the Six Nations. This year, maybe not up to the same level, but he played a big part in, Italy's performances this year, and, was one of the reasons why they were able to be so competitive in the tournament, winning 2 games, drawing another one. If that kick had gone over at the end, it would have been the first time where they won the majority of the games in the Six Nations. That's how good they were this year, and he was a big part of that. Then we have for Wales, we had Domachowski started off at loose head, didn't go so well, and then Thomas came in for him. Thomas had an okay term to say overall. No real big standout on the Welsh side, I would say, in terms of threatening for this position. But the player that I went for on the balance of the entire tournament, someone who I thought that was really good over basically the entire tournament, whether it was winning team or a losing team, and that was Pierre Schumann. He just felt like he was just that little bit better than anyone else that was available. So he is my loose head prop. Next, then, we're going to move on to hooker. So hooker, we can't talk about that without talking about, first of all, Dan Sheehan, joint top try scorer in the tournament for Ireland. The guy does his hooker role really well. Obviously, a big threat in terms of being at the back of mauls and stuff like that. But also, it's his ability around the park, the fact that he can be a link player, he can get there in support of breaks to make sure that he's there for an offload or to tip on a pass or anything like that, is so much more to his game than you see a lot of others hookers bringing. And then his bread and butter stuff has been pretty good. Like Ireland's line out went well for most of the tournament, did have a few kind of hiccups, but again, there wasn't really a team that didn't have one. Scrumming went pretty well too. We had Ronan Kelleher as well coming on for him, but he's not really in consideration for this because, to my mind, Sheehan is definitely the number one in Ireland, and therefore I'm not going to be picking Kelleher ahead of him. But I thought Kelleher had a decent tournament all the same. Then for Scotland, Turner last year was a big find for them. He had a massive tournament for them. This year maybe a little bit quieter, but still went around or about his task pretty well. Had a decent tournament, not as spectacular as last year, but still with these players that kind of have a breakthrough year, the second year is all about backing up, and I think he did that this year. Sometimes you see a player will have an amazing tournament, then the next year they play so badly that they're actually dropped out of the squad, but he was pretty good. For France, then we had Mauvaka at the start of the tournament, and he struggled, as did the rest of the team. When Marchand came back in, they looked a lot better, and he took maybe a while to settle back into being himself, but he was a threat at the breakdown, a decent set piece as well, and just the fact that he came in towards the end of the tournament, though he didn't play the whole thing starting hooker. Then for England, we had Jamie George. I thought he handled the whole thing of taking over captaincy from Owen Farrell. Then he had the death of his mother in the run up to the tournament as well, and carried himself with I felt great dignity through that. And, he's one of those players where, I don't like saying it, but it's pretty obvious that a lot of people, whether it's in Ireland or Scotland or Wales, especially those teams, like have almost an instant dislike for English players, or English media, or just the English team in general. And some of those players with their personalities don't really help themselves. For me, I don't really have that. When I was younger, it was kind of a thing that was around that I would do, and then I kind of grew up and matured, and then just realized, well, people are people, so who gives a shit what color they're wearing when they're playing against you? They're still just people, trying their best the same way that your team are. But Jamie George seems like a very likable guy, and that really helps, I think, when you give him the captaincy and stuff like that, therefore people want to see him doing well, and I want to see him doing well as well. And we had Theo Dan as well for England. You could see actually the difference between George and Dan. When Dan came on, the line-out struggled a lot more. Scrum struggled too, and he kind of failed to really have an impact there and to put any real pressure on George for his position. And probably one of the reasons why Jamie George was picked as captain is because he wasn't really under any pressure for his place. It's very difficult for a team where there are people kind of murmuring about maybe the backup guy should be starting, and if he wasn't the captain, etc., he'd be on the bench. But no problems for in that regard for Jamie George. I thought he had an excellent tournament. For Wales, then we had Ryan Elias and Elliot Dee, and a lot of chopping and changing in that Welsh front row. No real consistency in picking, and no real kind of front row triumvirate really emerging as yet in this reset under Gatland. So we have to see how it goes to them. I thought they had up and down, both were up and down kind of throughout the tournament. Then we had Nicotera for Italy. He's a guy, kind of unsung hero, I think, in some ways, and he had a very good tournament. For me, though, the guy that I'm going to pick is someone who I think is certainly got to be in the conversation for best hooker in the world. I'm not saying that he is the best in the world, because you got some South Africans that would certainly be in that conversation as well. But Dan Sheehan, for me, is my pick at hooker. I don't think that one is too controversial. I think he was the standout over the tournament. So next then we move on to tight head to complete our front row. So we start with Ireland again. We had Tadhg Furlong in there. Last year he absolutely looked, he came back in for the Scotland game. Was it Scotland? No. Was it Scotland or... He came back in the second last game. And then he looked very unfit. And then the last game as well, didn't look up to it. Then, through the warm-ups into the World Cup, started gaining fitness and a bit of form as well. And then, sadly lost his father, had a bit of a break off away from the game, and then came back looking completely refreshed and heading back towards that, summit that we've seen him at previously. I thought he had a really good tournament for Ireland. It was more, bread and butter kind of stuff rather than the fancy steps and offloads and stuff that we've seen in the past. But there's nothing wrong with a tight head just being a really good tight head, and I think that's what he was for Ireland in this tournament. Finlay Bealham then became a father during the tournament as well. I think he missed one game because of that, and Ollie Yeager got a shot in there. But for me, probably the best backup tight head in the tournament. He had an excellent impact for Ireland off the bench, and I think certainly in some other nations he would be the starting tight head. He's that good. On to France then. Uni Antonio, ever present I think for them pretty much, and another one who got better as the tournament went on, but also someone who still had impact even when France were playing badly. He still made meters, on his carries and put in good hits as well. So he wasn't as bad as those around him, I felt, in the first couple of rounds of the tournament. For England then, we had Stewart and Cole in there, kind of, switching in and out. And, again, kind of a pair that had their struggles, but also had their good days as well. And, for me, it feels like with the English front row, I think you probably look at it and say, well, it's probably Genge, George, and then one of Stewart and Cole. At the minute, at least, you could obviously have other people coming in there, but I think this is in terms of the England position, maybe the one that is more competitive than the others at the minute, at least. For Wales, then we had Azarati, who has been doing really well in the URC, got his chance, and then like a lot of, I think, the Welsh that kind of were brought in, given a chance, they weren't really given much of a chance, if you know what I mean. Like, because then Lewis came in to replace him as well, and then we had other guys, younger guys coming in as well towards the end of the tournament. So again, it's hard to really pick out someone who really stood out for that Welsh front row, because I felt, for the most part in the tournament, they struggled. Did have impact around the pitch, etc. But when they've been in on the losing side so much, it really is kind of a thankless task for these guys. But they had decent moments. For Italy, then we had Cesarelli was the starting tight head, but then we ended up with Ferrari in there, and he looked better towards the end of the tournament. The scrum looks more solid, and I think he gave a little bit more around the park as well. For Scotland, then we had Xander Fagerson in there. I thought he had a very good tournament, a lot of good impact, even some try threat coming at him as well. And then Scotland, it was very noticeable when he wasn't on the field, that the standards dropped a lot in their set piece. So I think he was quietly excellent through the tournament. But for me, the person that I felt over all 5 games that kind of stood out was Uni Antonio, someone who performed well in a team that wasn't performing well, and then as the team got better, just stepped up to another level as well. So he's my pick at tight head. So front row then is Pierce Schumann, Dan Sheehan, and Uni Antonio. I'm sure there's plenty of guys that I went through there that could, you could pick an entirely different front row and it'd still be excellent players. I think that there's enough, really good front rowers running around the Six Nations at the moment. On the second row, where the quality goes up even higher, I would say. So we're going to start with France on this one. So we have Gabri Lag, I think the guy's name was there to start. Then we had Woki come in, and then Flamon as well. So lots of chopping and changing from them. I think, Flamon of the 3 was probably the better, but he didn't play that much of the tournament. For Ireland then we had Joe McCarthy was pretty much an ever-present for them in that second row as the tight head lock. He, really emerged through the World Cup and then into the Six Nations, came in as a starter, and he was just a revelation for Ireland, bringing a physicality that we rarely see from Irish locks. We're used to kind of having athletic locks and then maybe a spoiler in there as well, but McCarthy was a guy that could go forward and do those hard yards for his team as well. And I thought for a young man, he was excellent. For England then we had Maro Itoje. He kind of had a dip in form maybe last year. You could see him getting through the World Cup, and then this year then I think he was back on it as well. And he's an outstanding player, a great athlete. Don't necessarily agree with the way he celebrates things, but hey, that's his personality, so fine. But yeah, I thought he had a very good tournament. Then For Italy, we had Niccolò Cannone. So happy to see him, getting a run of games in there, because I felt like that, for Italy last year, they chopped and changed their second row pairings so much over like the Six Nations and the World Cup, and it felt like they'd never arrive at a pairing that were going to work together, but they did, I think, in this tournament with and Cannone was a big part in that too. He's very willing, carrier of the ball, and likes to get involved as well, in terms of just running the ball and getting there and doing the dirty work, cleaning people out and stuff. For Scotland, then we had Richard Gray at the start of the tournament. I'm not sure, are we going to see him again? I don't remember whether he's announced retirement or anything like that, but it felt like maybe a last throw of the dice for him. But he seemed good at the start, and then they lose him. But then Grant Gilchrist came in, and I thought he had a fairly good tournament there as well. And then for Wales, David Jenkins, 21-year-old, captaining his country, and he didn't let his country or his teammates down. I thought he carried himself very well, similar to Jamie George, really, someone new to the captaincy and just kind of taking it in his stride, and he's got a big future ahead of him. But in terms of my pick for this one, I had to go for Joe McCarthy, just for the impact that he gave, to Ireland, bring something extra to them and to the tournament as a whole. So then, who is his partner going to be? So for France, then we had Willemse was there at the start. We lose him. Then Pasolo Tulagi came in. Just a bit of a cameo, like a teaser, really, I think, for the future of the French second row. The guy is a massive unit, and there's no doubt he's going to be, if he can stay fit, he's going to be a huge player, not just physically, but in terms of impact overall for France in the future as well. Then we had Miafu, who finished, in that second row for France, finished the tournament there. Then on to Ireland. Then we had Tadhg Beirne in there. The Tadhg Beirne, I felt before kind of the start of the year, the beginning of the season up to about Christmas time, I thought he was very much out of form. Felt like maybe the disappointment of the World Cup had a big impact on him. Then he started coming into form into the new year through the Champions Cup games, and then the first 3 games for Ireland, the guy was absolutely outstanding. Maybe not his best game against England or against Scotland, really, but still a guy who I felt really delivered throughout the tournament as well. We're used to seeing him being competitive at the breakdown, but and also getting in there and winning turnovers and stuff like that, disrupting mauls, and he did that brilliantly, I thought. Then we had James Ryan in there as well off the bench. A guy who would have thought, this time last year that James Ryan, fit and available, wouldn't have been in the mix to start. That's how good Joe McCarthy, I think, was this year, that he was keeping someone of his quality on the bench. Obviously, then he did get injured and had to drop out of the squad, but there was no doubt he was absolutely available when McCarthy and Beirne were picked as a starting locking pair. I think James Ryan has dealt with a lot of adversity well in over the last couple of years. Some kind of bouncing back from a loss in form, and speculation about being captain and not getting picked, but I think he dealt with it well, and he's a guy that he doesn't complain about things. He's out injured now as well, but I've no doubt he's going to apply himself and come back a better player. On to England, then we had Ollie Chesham in there, who I thought was excellent beside Itoje in the first kind of, I think it was 3 rounds he was in that second row. And I thought they looked really good as a pairing. And he also not just doing kind of the dirty work, but also getting involved in attacks. And I think he had a few offloads as well, around there too, and just really good impact overall. Then we had George Martin beside him, who could come in for him when Chesham switched to the back row in the Ireland game, and also in the last game against France as well. And he had a big impact, in terms of physicality against Ireland as well, and was part of the reason why I think England's strategy worked so well, was the fact that they had him in there as well. Was injured for the start of the tournament, but certainly in the 2 games that he played, looked really decent. Then we have Federico Ruzza. I think the top. I think he stole the most lineouts in the tournament, and possibly claimed the most lineouts as well overall. So the guy was just a phenomenon, and then had great impact around the park as well, and a big part of Italy's success this year as well. For Scotland, then we had Scott Cummings in there. He definitely had a decent tournament, and I think Gilchrist and Cummings were a pretty solid second row pairing for them. Came up with some big moments for his team as well, but not necessarily his fault that he couldn't get his fingertips to that ball that ended up just landing in Sheehan's lap to go over and score. But I'm sure he given the kind of player that he is, that he just would have wished that his arms were just a little bit longer, so we could have prevented that. But overall, an excellent tournament from him. Then we had Adam Beard in for Wales. I think maybe of the two between themselves and Jenkins, I think Jenkins probably had the better tournament, but I'm sure that he did a lot to kind of bring him on and make sure that he got an easier ride, as it were, in the tournament, and just kind of little tips and stuff like that, or just chats or whatever with him. But yeah, those are kind of the players that I saw kind of standing out. In the 5 short, but the player they're going to pick here is Federico Ruzza, because I think he deserves it. This was certainly one of the harder ones to pick, because there were at least 2 other players that I mentioned in here that I think deserve to be in the team of the tournament, and one of those, a bit of a spoiler, one of those does make it, and one of them unfortunately doesn't make it. But yeah, it was very, very competitive position. But I just felt that, given what Italy had done in the tournament, I had to recognise at least one of the forwards, and Ruzza for me was the standout guy for them. So our second row pairing then is Joe McCarthy and Federico Ruzza. Onto the back row then, we're going to start with 6. So for France, you had Francois Crowe and then Paul Baudin. I think they were the 2 main ones in there. There was a lot of chopping and changing, injuries and stuff like that for France through the tournament, and no real kind of consistency for them. But I thought Crowe, as the team got better, he was one of the ones that really contributed to that. Baudin kind of deputized fairly well, but still feels like at the moment at least it's a step down when they have to play him. For Ireland then, you had Peter O'Mahony taking over the captaincy from Johnny Sexton. I thought he did really well in that respect. Overall, maybe not up to the level that we've seen Peter O'Mahony in kind of past tournaments or wherever, but still had a decent impact. Would absolutely love to take back that yellow card he got against England. Just maybe trying to be just maybe a brain fart or whatever. I don't know what happened to him there, but or just thinking that he's going to prevent a try, but it really didn't work out for Ireland there. But other than that, pretty faultless for the rest of the tournament and led the troops well, threaded the breakdown, really good option in the line-out as well. Great at disrupting opposition line-out too. Also, we saw Ryan Baird in there kind of, I think he started against Italy maybe, and he was coming on as well into that position later in games too. He's a player who, he was like the galloping giraffe is what he was kind of nicknamed, and we didn't see as much of that side of him, but we've seen that he's matured, I think, as a player in terms of just getting in there and doing his core work and doing it really well. For England then, Ethan Root started out there for England. Started out actually fairly well, had some decent impact, looked like they had a nice balance in the back row, and then later on in the term, then Ollie Chesham came in and did that kind of role we've seen, for England before, where you have, like, I think it was Courtney Laws, right, used to do it, like a second row playing six and just having, that kind of bigger unit in there and having good impact. And thought he was excellent and had a big part in that win over Ireland as well. Then off the bench for England, someone who really impressed me was Cunningham South too. That guy seems to have a big future ahead of him. Didn't get any, I don't think he did get a start, right? But anytime he come on to the field, he made it count. For Italy then, there was a lot of kind of mixing and matching. We had, like, Negri was in there for a few games, and Isakor was there for at least one game. Favoretto was in there as well. So Negri certainly the pick of those three for me. On to Scotland, kind of similar story for them as well. We had Crosby in there, then Jamie Ritchie. Jamie Ritchie, I thought, word for him that, lost the captaincy, lost his place in the team as well, didn't grumble about it, put his head down, did his work. I thought, when he got a start, he played well. When he had to be on the bench, he had impact as well off the bench. So that's the kind of player you want in your squad, not someone who's going to moan about this, that and the other. Someone who just goes, okay, well, things aren't going my way, well, I'm just going to work as hard or even harder than I was before, and maybe things will fall my way. And that's the kind of player you need in a squad, I think. Then we saw young Christie in there towards the end of the tournament as well, and he looks like a good prospect for the future. For Wales then, we had again a lot of kind of changing. We had both of them at the start of the tournament. We didn't see too much of him. Then Alex Mann got, he got a couple of tries, looked decent in there, looked like maybe, with Rafael and Wainwright, that would be a decent combination there. Then we got Mackenzie Martin come in as well, and he looks like another decent one for the future as well. So, I think for Wales, it is looking to the future rather than today. And my pick here was again, a difficult pick on this one in terms of just, who I felt would be best in the team overall rather than who played the best in this position. And because of that, I've gone for Ollie Chesham, because I felt like his contribution in the second row and in the back row over the entire tournament, for me, meant that it was the right decision to pick him in there. I could have been sentimental and put in Peter O'Mahony, or just let my Irish bias do that, or I could have gone obviously for Crowe from France, or a bunch of other players as well who had good tournaments, but he's the guy that I picked, and that's fine as far as I'm concerned. Now on to 7. For France, we had Charles Oliwan. I think he was in and out of the, with injuries and stuff, in there a little bit. And another one who, Started the tournament, maybe not the best. I think the Irish back row really did overshadow their French counterparts at the start, and then towards the end, then we saw them kind of being more at the level that we expected them to be at. Then we had Josh van der Fleur, not at the level that, of World Player of the Year that he was a couple of years ago, but still quietly efficient. We don't see as much of him though in terms of a link player that we saw previously, and maybe that's something we'd like to see come back into his game, especially given that against England and Scotland, Ireland's attack kind of faltered a little bit. Maybe him getting a little bit more involved with carries, but not just carries and looking to who he has in support and giving offloads for getting players through gaps and stuff like that. But that comes with confidence, and I feel like maybe I'm sure he's not without any confidence at all, but it doesn't feel like it's at the level that it was previously. And maybe this win in the tournament will help him to kind of move up there. Then we had Underhill for England, who was, for me, when he come onto the scene first for England, looked absolutely amazing, was excellent, and then the English churn happens where a player just somehow ends up out in the wilderness and then has to fight 20 other guys who are all tearing up trees apparently in the Premiership to get back into the team. He did that, he got back in, looked great, had an excellent tournament, probably better at the start of the tournament than the end, but still a guy who's absolutely worth his place in that England team. On to Italy then. We had Lamoureux there, Michel Lamoureux. He's someone that I admire as a player and as a person as well. He's a really inspirational captain for his team. He's the kind of guy that I feel that he's going to inspire generations of Italian players in the future. And you already saw him speaking at the end of the Welsh game that They don't want to just be kind of flash in the pan wins. They want to get better and better and get up there and compete with the top teams in this tournament. And whether he does that in his career or not, I think he will certainly inspire the generation that does do that. We also saw Giuliani in there at times, when Lamoureux had to switch to 8, when they had to mix around their back row. I think Giuliani is a player who, when he's involved, always lifts the standards, I think, of the Italian team, simply because he puts pressure on the guys who were starting to perform, to prove that they're worth their place, because they're not, that Giuliani is going to slot in and do a really good job in there. For Scotland then, we saw Ritchie in there as well. He switched between 6 and 7 at times. We also saw Rory Darge come back in, I think, from the second game as co-captain, and then he was kind of a fixture at 7. Thought Darge had a decent tournament, maybe not as abrasive at the breakdown as we've seen before, or maybe it's just that he didn't win in the tight games, thinking of against Ireland and against France, not winning as many maybe landmark turnovers or penalties as we've seen him in the past. Not that he didn't win turnovers there, just not maybe to the same magnitude as we've seen in the past, but still a very decent tournament from him. Tommy Rafel in a losing Welsh team, looking really good, looking like one of possibly the best players in the tournament in a team that lost all 5 games. Just speaks to how good this guy is, and that's why I've actually picked him in my team. So my number 7 is Tommy Rafel. On to then the final position, the back row, number 8. So for France, we had Gregory Aldrit. For me, probably, apart from Antonio, probably France's best forward through the tournament. I felt like his standards didn't drop as much as, especially his buddies there in the back row, Crow and Olivon. through the tournament. We also saw Crow back there for a little bit as well, as France kind of mixed things up or had players missing, but of the two, I think Algeria had a better tournament. For Ireland, then we had Caelan Doris. In the first couple of rounds, he had great impact in terms of his carries. He was putting on a bit of footwork, making lots of meters after contact. I think his influence as a ball carrier kind of dipped in the last 2 rounds of the tournament. Then we had Jack Conan as well. I think he deserves a mention, because coming off the bench, he always had impact for Ireland. He does make meters, but also he has really good hands and a great offloading game as well that can and did help Ireland towards the end of games. For England, then Ben Earl was excellent in there, in what was, a quality English back row through the tournament, and he's it's not just pace that the guy has, he does the grunt work as well, and he's got really good, good reading in terms of the game as well. And I think he, through the tournament, he became a better player for me. Then for Italy, we had Lorenzo Canone, back there, himself and his brother. I think when the two of them were in the Italy team, Italy just looked a lot better than without them. He was decent through it. But then we had Vincent as well, who came in. He plays, I think, for Exeter in the Premiership. He's, there's this big story about him being a pizza delivery guy, right? For whoever it is, Domino's Pizza or something like that. But like the guy, he's looking like a really good prospect, and hopefully he's not one of these that has like just one good tournament and then they don't see him again, because I think he adds a lot to that Italy team, whether it's off the bench or as a starter. And for me, produced one of the moments of the tournament where against Wales somehow made up a ton of meters to get back and make a saving tackle, then spin around and clear release, get over the ball and win a penalty as well, when it looked like Wales were going to go over for a try and maybe swing the momentum of the game. So just a huge moment, I think, in the tournament. It reminded me of Peter O'Mahony a few years ago against, I'm pretty sure it was against the All Blacks, where there was a ball was breaking and it looked for all the world it was going to break for 1 or 2, or even 3 All Blacks that were in and around the ball. And if an All Black got their hands on it, it was a try. But he somehow, did some kind of Mr. Stretch or whatever, and got his hands on the ball to save that and to keep the ball for Ireland. And this for me had that kind of same impact, just in terms of looking at it and going, wow, that was a special moment. And that's, I think, one of the great things about rugby and being a rugby fan, is that it doesn't have to be like a step or a try or whatever that just makes you sit up and go, wow. It can be stuff like that as well. And for me, that was one of the moments of the tournament. For Scotland, then we had Matt Ferguson in there. He was kind of in and out of the team. We also had Dempsey back there. I thought of the two, Dempsey was the better, and I thought Dempsey maybe overall was probably Scotland's best back row player, just kind of impact on his carries and an impact around the breakdown and in open play as well. Then for Wales, you had Aaron Wainwright, who again in a losing team had a fairly decent tournament. And again, to stand out in a team that is getting beaten week in, week out, just shows how special that guy can be. So once, Wales get a bit of confidence, I'm expecting to see him improve even more. But my pick for the tournament, in the number 8 shirt, is Ben Earl. I thought that he kind of stood out the most. So my back row then is Ollie Chesham, Tommy Reffel and Ben Earl. But looking at the players available in there. You could pick 5 or 6 different combinations back there using different players, and it'd all be like just top quality players. That's the level of competition that you have in this Six Nations, especially in the back row. On to 9 then for France. We had Luku was a starting 9 for them. At the beginning of the tournament, Le Garrick was there as well. I thought he had great impact off the bench, and then when he actually got a start, you could see that he for me at least, he was the better of the two in terms of what he did in this tournament. He's got like some really crazy skills and some great confidence as well in there, and I felt like he really upped the tempo for France when he replaced Luku. I have to say as well that Luku dealt with being dropped very well. He didn't kind of sulk when he came on himself. He was still having decent impact too. For Ireland then we had James Gibson Park. He was, I think, really good for Ireland, and he is so integral to the way Ireland play too. It's not just the speed of his pass, but the speed of his thinking as well. For the most part, really does help Ireland stay on the front foot and keep that ball quick. And we saw, I think, the impact when he had to move on to the wing. When Conor Murray come on, because we lost two wingers due to HIAs against England. So the fact that he moved, I'm not saying that Ireland would have won the game, he had to stay there, just that you could see the difference. And like Conor Murray, he's won lots of caps for the Lions, and he's been an amazing player for Ireland down through the years. But Gibson Park just felt special this year. Then for England, then we had Alex Mitchell, who I feel is probably their best option at 9. You also saw Danny Kerr there. I think it was the game where he was winning his 100 cap. He got a start, but both of them pretty decent. I think Mitchell was probably the better of the two. For Italy, then we saw at least 3 players that I can remember. Had Alessandro Garbisi alongside his brother. Beginning the tournament, then we had Varney came in, and then Paj Raylo came in towards the end as well. And each of them brought something good to the position, and that's kind of a nice place to be. Where I think Paj Raylo, maybe just the fact that he can kick long distance goals as well, might be what shades it for him, as long as he's performing the rest of his duties in terms of settling that battle for 9 there. For Scotland, then we saw Ben White and George Horne come in and both be effective. White, I think, has more of a kind of established kicking game than Horne, certainly in this tournament at least. Then for Wales, again, we saw lots of players. Gareth Davis, so Tomas Williams, and then Kieran Hardy towards the end as well. I felt Tomas Williams probably had the better tournament of those 3. And my pick, though, for this, he was integral to his team lifting the trophy, and it's James Gibson Park. His partner then at 10, this is another really tough one to pick, and I think I changed my mind between 3 different players so often before I actually settled on the player that I did pick, and it was razor thin margin, and each time when I looked at it again, it was like I would make an argument for this player, and then we go, oh yeah, well then he should definitely be the starter, and then I would think of it again and think, oh no, well this guy, maybe he should be. But I had to make a decision in the end. I made the decision, and sure, some people will like us, some people won't, but hey, again, we can still be friends, right? So let's start with France. We have Jalabert there at starting 10 for France. Didn't think it was that great, and then he gets injured and he's out, and then Ramos has to slot in. Ramos looked decent when he moved from fullback into 10, and as their like 3rd or 4th choice 10 or wherever he is, I thought he really guided them well in those last couple of rounds. For Ireland, then we had young Jack Crowley, in the shadow, like you're thinking coming into the tournament, at least he's in the shadow of Johnny Sexton, and how's he going to cope with it? And he just absolutely took it on, no fear in him, and just stepped out of that shadow. And now there's no doubt, I think, in anybody's mind who Ireland's starting 10 is, even though like coming into this, people would have been making debates for for Ross Byrne, or giving one of the 10s that's been tried before another go, or even talk of like crazy talk I felt of Prendergast stepping up to senior level. But Crowley played every minute of the tournament and looked just so assured for Ireland. It wasn't a perfect tournament for him, but as with all the weight of expectation on him, I think it was as perfect as it could be for a debut tournament for a 10, coming into a position where another guy who's a legend of Irish rugby had been there for so long, to be able to cope with that so well just speaks to the maturity of him at such a young age. Then for England, then we had George Ford, and we also had Marcus Smith coming on as well. He got the drop goal against Ireland. We didn't see him that much in terms of starting, but George Ford I felt had a decent game, or a decent tournament, and as England's attacking system bedded in through the tournament, you could see that for me at least, he's the guy that's best suited to make that system work. I think Smith is the guy, if the system isn't giving you what you want, he can give you something extra. But Ford, in terms of just making the system work and making the players around them play better and look better, I think he's the one for that. Then for Italy, we had Paolo Garbisi. So coming into the tournament, there probably wasn't a debate between who's going to be the starting 10. Is it going to be Garbisi, or is it going to be Tommaso Allen? But Garbisi put that to bed again, kind of similar to the Crowley situation, and he played really well through the tournament, and he's no doubt, I think, the starting 10 for Italy going forward. For Scotland, then we had Finn Russell in there. The guy is mercurial talent. He's got crazy passes and crazy long passes, but he's also got a good tactical kicking game. He was like almost immaculate from the tee. I think, did he only miss one kick in the entire tournament or something like that? Is like balls of steel to be able to produce that for your team. And also can conjure something out of nothing, but can make that Scotland tack work really well too. He can be conventional and he can be unconventional as well. For Wales, we saw two young players, Sam Costello and Johan Lloyd. Costello, I think, in the end was the preferred option. Johan Lloyd looks like though he has a really good future ahead of him, and if Wales can nurture the two of them, they're going to be looking good, I think, in their 10 stocks, even having lost some real experience there with retirements, etc., after the World Cup or even before the World Cup for them. But player went for in this one was, and again, it was really tough to pick them, but I finally settled on Finn Russell there in the 10 jersey. But you probably know who the other two people that I was debating between, and if you picked either one of those in 10, you got absolutely no argument from me on your choice there. Now let's halfbacks, Jameson, Gibson Park and Finn Russell then. Okay, on to the wing. So left wing was one of the most competitive positions in the entire tournament. I felt we had some of the best backs talent on show there. So we're going to start with France. Mo Fana had to play there in the first game for them, and not really, for me at least, not really a natural position for him. I'm used to kind of seeing him either filling at 10 or more naturally in the centres, but he did a job there, but didn't didn't look amazing. His team didn't look amazing, but he didn't kind of stand out either as kind of trying harder than the others or anything. Then we had BLBRE, who started the tournament on the bench and then worked his way into the into a starting position. And he's only a young guy, but he had some really, really magic moments through the tournament. Was involved in one of the best tries of the tournament as well. Then for Ireland, we had James Lowe. Obviously, there's a lot of talk about that massive boot of his being so important to Ireland, but also knows his way to the try line. He got 4 tries in the tournament. His defense was excellent. There was a few kind of try savers that he put in, and after being so maligned about it a few seasons ago, being able to get to that level on defense is really impressive. It shows how hard the guy works. He might be come across as a little bit of a clown at times, but he when he needs to be serious, he's serious as well. For England, then I think Daly was kind of an ever-present there on the left wing for them. He's maybe not the kind of rocket that we saw previously in a long time ago, it feels now, but he had a decent tournament for them. Kind of, I would say, good but not spectacular really for him. Then with Monte Ioane, Italy really missed its guy last year, just because he gives them something that a lot of their other choices at wing or fullback don't, and that is the ability to ride contact. You've got Capuozzo, who can be very evasive, that kind of similar with Pani as well. And then we've seen like centres and stuff being tried on the wing and not really looking all that comfortable out there. But Ioane is the real deal. The guy, and this year I think he went looking for a lot more work than we've seen him in the past. He missed last year's tournament because he was playing Super Rugby in the Southern Hemisphere, and he talked about considering retiring before the World Cup, etc. And I think the Six Nations and the game rugby have to count himself very lucky that he didn't, because he had an excellent tournament and he's just a joy to watch. Then we have a guy who is an absolute dream to watch, and that's Duhan van der Merwe. Joint top try scorer, I think, with Dan Sheen on 5 at the end of the tournament. Had some absolutely stellar games. Last 2 rounds, maybe not up to the same level as he was in the beginning of the tournament. I felt like that, both Ireland and Italy kind of managed him fairly well overall, but when he did get into space and he did get a chance, like, boy, did he look super good. Scored a couple of tries that must be in there with a shout for try of the tournament as well. Then for Wales, we had Rio Dyer. He's always a guy that looks good, because he has that ability to break and that sense of kind of a gap or space. And I think part of, though, in terms of his game, that may need to improve is just his awareness of where his support is and that kind of things. We've seen at times where you break and then get isolated and then get turnover as a penalty or whatever. But that's going to come, I think, with experience. He still had a pretty decent tournament overall. This one was really, really difficult for me to pick, because there's 2 guys in there who, between them, they scored 9 tries in the tournament. They were hugely influential for their teams, but because other than try scoring, the player that I picked brought a little bit more and was maybe had more of an impact as well on the in terms of games where, even in the game where his team lost, I'm going to go for James Lowe, because I felt that just over the overall game in the tournament, he shaded it a little bit. And I don't mind saying that this was one of these ones where when I picked my original team, I picked both of them. But then I was saying, well, no, I can't do that because they're both left wingers, so they have to compete for one position. And that was so difficult to make that choice. And again, my head, even right now, is saying, well, why didn't you pick Van der Merwe then? So, it's just, again, under one of those where it's razor thin. And if you went for Van der Merwe on that one, I'm absolutely not going to disagree with you. They're both excellent choices, I think, for there. Now, on to the centres. So we're going to start with inside centre. Obviously, first of all, we've got Dante, who was in there for France, got his red card. Wasn't as impactful as we've seen him previously, either carrying or at the breakdown, and had a very negative impact in the end on his team. Then we had Deporte there, who come in his absence. Looks like a decent prospect for the future. Didn't, hugely stand out in the tournament overall, but still, again, showed enough to I think, warrant having another look at him there in the centres for France. Then for Ireland, we had Bundy Aki, who for me has been Ireland's best player probably over the last year, and massive impact in attack and defense. I think he has, he's improved his defense, or his attack actually, immensely. It used to be where Bundy Aki, give him the ball, he's going to run straight, he's going to look for contact, he's probably going to make meters after contact as well. But now you can see he's putting on a little bit of footwork, not necessarily looking to just run through people, also looking for the space. His awareness of the players around him as well, and his offloading game has improved. His ability to pass before he goes into contact as well has improved as well, and it just speaks a lot to this guy that at this stage where he's easily very well established in the team, that he's still looking to get better as well. We did see McCluskey in there too. He's a guy that I think he's a little bit unlucky to given that the stocks that Ireland have, especially at 12, but he didn't let the side down when he did appear there. He's got some silky skills, he's got the bulk as well to ride contact, etc. On to then England, we saw Dingwall there at the start of the tournament, and then he was out and we didn't see him for the rest. Ollie Lawrence come in, and Ollie Lawrence was kind of there when England's attack started to click, and he played a big part in that, and also benefited from that as well. Again, he had a couple of tries there. Then we had Menoncello in there for Italy. He's a young guy, but he feels like he's to the manner born in the 2012 shirt. He did have to play one game on the wing and didn't look anywhere near as effective for Italy. But when he's in there in 12, the guy defensively and on attack, basically both sides of the ball, looks like he's improving game on game at test level. We saw Maury in there as well, I think, for one game. But for me, out of the two, certainly Menoncello was the one that stood out. For Scotland then, we had a few different players. We had Tuipulotu, to start the tournament, looked like himself and Hugh Jones were kind of re-establishing that partnership that did so well in last year's tournament, and then he was out injured. We also saw Cameron Redpath in there, I think, for one game. He deputised well, and then MacDowell was in there towards the end, and he looks like a real prospect for the future and somebody who is maybe going to push Tuipulotu for a starter position. For Wales then, we saw Nick Tompkins in there. I think he was like Wales' top offloader through the tournament. But Wales, I think they just kept rotating their centres as well, and didn't really find, at least for now, a combination that has worked for them so far. At least we didn't see combinations really getting too many repeat times together for them. But the person I went for here, again, excellent tournament for him was Bundy Aki. His partner then, let's see who the nominees are for that. So we had for France, Gael Ficou started the tournament, looked a bit flat and looked a little bit off form, but towards the end then we could see him back to his brilliant best, even defensively as well, having decent impact for them. For Ireland, we had Robbie Henshaw in there. Most people would have said if Ringrose had been fit, he probably would have been a 13. But I think Henshaw, as a player who's now more used to be, playing at 12, I think he deputised fairly well in there and certainly didn't let his nation down. For England, we saw Henry Slade. I think we saw Manu Tulagi as well towards the end of the tournament. Although I don't know whether did he come on at 12 or 13, I can't remember. But Slade and Lawrence, I think, for me, were England's best centre combination through the tournament, and hopefully that's the centre combination we see going forward. Juan Ignacio Brex for Italy. The guy, he's another one of these who he's established international, but is still getting better. He has, I think, improved on, immensely, I think, his attacking game, his awareness again of where support runners are, and his ability to offload with sympathy to those support runners really has gone up several notches. I feel he's a great defensive reader and aggressive at the breakdown as well. Then we had Hugh Jones, had a kind of a quiet tournament, and then just brought that touch of magic against Ireland for his try. I thought that really was excellent, and just showed if he can get him in with just a sniff, he's gonna take it. We then saw for Wales again a bunch of guys: Owen Watkin, George North, and Mason Grady there. None of them really shining too much. George North, I feel, in the centre, nowhere near the impact that he used to have when he was on the wing, but obviously didn't have the pace anymore to realistically play on the wing. But I think it's just a case of Gatlin has to pick a combination and just give them time together, and if he does that, I think both players in that combination will look better in time. But my pick for this one is Juan Ignacio Brex. So my centres, Bundy Aki and Juan Ignacio Brex. On to the right wing then. This is a tough one to pick because I felt that the standard here wasn't as high as left wing, and that was why initially I'd actually picked Duhan van der Merwe on the right wing, and then kind of pulled myself up and said, no, you can't do that. But for France, we have Damien Penaud. Even when France were terrible, he still looked dangerous. Didn't score as many tries as maybe we're used to seeing him, but the amount of breaks that he made and the amount of tries that he laid on certainly, showed that he was one of France's better players, I felt, over the entire tournament. Then we had Calvin Nash in there, so deputising for the injured Matt Hansen, and he did really well. You didn't have anyone screaming at, oh, this guy isn't up to it and get him out of the team and blah blah blah. He handled himself very well. He got himself some tries as too, and I think when Hansen come back, Hansen probably still goes into the team, but Nash, we know that he can do a job, and we want to see him getting more caps. We want to it to be a case of he has to wait until the next time that Hansen gets injured. We want to see a little bit of rotation maybe so that he can be kept in the mix there. For England then, we had Freeman there, who had a quietly good tournament, I would say, for England. We also had Faye Woboso, who, I think he got one start. Was that against Ireland? And then he got injured, but his impact off the bench was excellent. He also had a good game against Ireland and looks like a real prospect for the future. For Italy, we just saw a ton of players being tried. Pani was out there, Menoncello had a game out there, Capuozzo was there once, and Lina was out there as well. And Pani did decently, I think, in the last game. Line as well looked decent on his on his debut. Capuozzo, I feel, looks better when he's at fullback, and Menoncello absolutely looks better when he's in the centres. For Scotland, then we saw Kyle Steyn there, and I think Rowe was drafted in there one time as well. I think when Steyn's wife was in labour or something, he was missing for one of the games, so Rowe was drafted in for that one. Was it the game against England? I can't remember, but yeah, I think. But Steyn, gives them good go forward after contact. Mostly, solid on his defence as well, and knows where the try line is too. Then the last person in this category is Josh Adams for Wales. He was a really good winger. I don't think he is now, and I think that if Wales had a young player of the mold of Dyer coming up, maybe Adams would have lost his place at this stage, because I don't think he's doing it as much as he was before. And then he had that situation where he petulantly threw the ball into the crowd and got a yellow card for it as well. And I think that just shows you kind of the dearth of stocks for the right wing in Wales, that he wasn't dropped and somebody else brought in instead of him after that. He's still a decent player, but I think again, if Wales had a young player who was a real prospect, he would probably be starting ahead of Adams. So my pick for this, then, it was tough, but I went for someone who, in a team that were poor, looked good, and then when the team started playing well, he got even better, and that is Damien Penaud. So wings then are James Lowe and Damien Penaud. Final pick then is fullback. So for France, you had Tomo Ramos was in there for the first few rounds. You always know what you're going to get with Ramos. Threat on the break, decent under high ball, and kicks really well from the tee as well. I felt he looked better when he went into 10. But I think that may have been the fact that just France looked better overall, because I think his natural position in a blue shirt at least is 15. Then we had Barret, we saw there as well. Looks a real prospect for the future. Didn't see enough of him over the entire tournament though to say that he's in with a shout for this. I think you had Hugo Keenan for Ireland. Sadly, had a couple of problems with injury, but the games he did play looked really good. He had Frawley there, who come in to deputise for him as well, and did decently there too. I think was Larmour had to play the last game as well, because Keenan pulled up in the warm up as well. But Larmour, we didn't see as much of him this tournament, and the conditions really weren't conducive to his kind of twinkle toe running style. For England then, we had Freddie Stewart at the start of the tournament, and for me it's still getting over the shock of the guy that I felt was most secure in his position in that England backline is now kind of completely out of consideration, because George Furbank could come in, and I can see why. Initially, I was questioning it. I didn't see why you would drop someone who was performing as well as Stewart and so solid under the high ball. It's because Furbank maybe not as good as Stewart under the high ball, but he's not a weak link in that part of his game, and he gives him so much more in attack as well. And this new attacking system, I think a fullback like Furbank just absolutely suits us so much more than Stewart does. For Italy then, we had Capuozzo. Didn't see as much as we'd liked of him in the tournament. When we did see him, he really did light things up. We also had Tommaso Allen in there for a game, and Pani was back there for a game as well. For Scotland, we had Rowe was back there for at least one game. We had Patterson came in when Stain was missing, and Rowe had to move from his initial pick of fullback to the wing. I thought Patterson did well too. And with Blair Kinghorn, who gives Scotland that option of a second playmaker that just pace to burn, and the eye for a try as well. He was probably overall had the best impact, but I felt like the three players that played back there through the tournament did pretty well for Scotland. And then finally for Wales, you had Cameron Winnett. So they had no Lee Halfpenny, no Liam Williams back there, and everybody's thinking like, oh, well, what's going to happen now? And it felt like very similar to Ireland when Rob Kearney was retiring, and people were looking at the likes of Lowry and Larmour and who else? A few others as well were tried back there at fullback. I think Will Addison was another one considered, and a few others too. I think what's his name? I can't remember. The guy who played 10 for Munster and left this year. I can't remember his name's just brain farted out of my brain, but it was kind of that kind of thing. And then Hugo Keenan comes along and goes, no, actually it's me. And everyone, okay. And I felt like that with Cameron Winnett as well, that he just come in and said, don't worry guys, I got this. And he did have it, and he played exceptionally well through the tournament. And a team again that was losing all the time, he looked really good. There were like a few mistakes, but you get that with a young guy, especially there was a mix up there. I think himself and Costello going for the same ball against Italy, and then they caused a knock on, but mostly assured and dangerous in attack as well. And because of that, he's the guy that actually picked as my 15. So that's my team pick. Let's run down through them again. So front row, Pierre Schoeman, Dan Sheehan, Uni Antonio. Second row is Joe McCarthy and Federico Ruzza. Back row, Ollie Chesham, Tommy Reffel, Ben Earl. The halfbacks, James Gibson Park and Finn Russell. Left wing, James Lowe. Centres, Bundy Aki and Juan Ignacio Brex. Right wing, Damien Pinot. And fullback is Cameron Winnett. So that's my selection. Feel free to tell me how wrong I am, how many of them I got wrong, and what you would have picked. Instead of me down in the comments, it's all just a good bit of fun and a good bit of banter, and just a good way, I think, to have a chat about rugby and how many amazing players there were in this year's tournament. But that's it from me. I will probably do a wrap up of I'm not sure whether I'll do like one on the tournament as a whole, or on first of all on round 5 and then on the tournament as a whole, but we'll probably do both of those in the coming week. If I have time, I'm going to do a stats video as well, but that might be next week because those always take a long time to do. Then we're also going to be kind of moving back into the URC, which comes back this weekend, but also Women's Six Nations coming up as well. So going to be covering that, and I hope that some of you who have been watching through this Six Nations will also stick around for that, because it promises to be one of the most competitive that we've had in a long time. And the women's game, in terms of, if you're looking at the game of rugby growing at the moment, that's where all the action is. But that's it from me. Again, thank you for taking the time to watch this for however long I've been going. It must be at least an hour. Yeah, it's way over an hour at this stage. So thanks for hanging on in there and getting to the end of the video if you did, and I'll see you on the next one.